Good afternoon everyone. So I'm going to present on this topic of identity management and access control. Am I audible? On this, am I audible, right? Okay, I think I'm audible. Am I audible? Okay. So this is one of the very crucial component of any software system in the increasingly software-driven world, because the importance of managing identity and controlling access is like very crucial in the modern day systems. And again, like it also help us to preserve the access and authorization of particular resources within the software component. So in this presentation, like I will go through all the detailed concepts which are involved in identity management, and then we will see how access control work over the identity management. So yeah, so these are the topics that I'm going to cover. So we'll start with the basic introduction of identity management. Then over that, there is identity management and access, identity and the access management, which is built over the identity management. Then I will introduce to the core components of the identity management. And then there's something called as identity provider, which is kind of abstract all these functionalities for you so that it is very easy to integrate into your inbuilt system. Then I will also go over the traditional IAM tools like LDAP. And then yeah, we will discover the modern technology. And I have one use case related to how we can integrate IAM in our web applications. So let's start with what is identity management. So basically, the term identity management itself very intuitive. It's mentioned about the identity, that is how to basically manage the user within the system. It also helps us to provide authenticate user, as well as it also check the authorization of the user, not just the user, but also it check the authorization at the group level or the role level as well. So So basically, the identity management is one of the crucial component which help us to build a secure software system. And going further, like it is mainly consists of three main components. That is user provisioning. So what is user provisioning? Is like it involves creating and setting up user accounts, and then it also helps us to assign a initial role to the user. So like in a software system, there are multiple kind of roles. So for example, if you consider Canvas as a software, so in that software we have multiple roles. Like we have teacher as a role, then we have TA as a role, we have student as a role, and these roles are very at different interval of time. So for example, I was a student back 1 year back, but now I'm a TA. So now the system should be adaptable to these changes. So this is a very crucial thing, and through this role changes, it should also provide the proper authorization as well. So all these stuffs are managed by the user provisioning module of the basically identity management tool. Next, we have authentication. So what is authentication? So authentication is just like when someone come to you and he says like, I am this person, I am this user. So we want some mechanism through which we can validate if he's a true user or not, if he's a true person or not. So if I'm going to a government and I'm asking for some benefits or something like that, so they usually ask me to prove my identity if I'm that authorized person or not. So in that case, we provide them some maybe government IDs or SSN, something like that. So that is a real world case of authentication. That's how we do authentication in real world. And another component is the access control. So once user is authenticated, now it's like as a user, I'm not supposed to access all the components within the software system. Or if I give an example of the real world, so I'm a foreign student, so I won't be able to I'm not able to apply for the job which require the high security risks to the US. So that also need to be validated if I'm access to that particular resource or not. If I'm so if I give a real world example again, so if as I mentioned, like I'm authenticated that I'm this particular person studying in the ASU, but if I'm allowed to apply for a high security job, it will depend on the access control. If I have the access of that or not. So these are the three main crucial components of the basically identity management. So let's see like how basically identity management evolved over the time. As I mentioned, before any physical, any digital devices are there, we used to have physical IDs to verify our identity. As I mentioned, like we used to have government ID cards, and also like currently also we have student ID cards in our ASU campus. But now I think it is migrated to a digital card. Previously, like identity was managed by totally on the basis of physical cards. But when the digital era came, so each system used to have their own user. So it's not centralized, or you are not able to control the identity within organization as a whole. It depends on the particular system. Like for example, I have one system which is hosted the HR database. So there is a particular person assigned to that system who is only able to access that particular local computer, and he is only able to access that resources. So, like if I wanted to share that data or that computer, so it was very difficult for me in initial stages. Then there comes the network era when we started connecting all these computers using networks, like for example networks. So we started connecting different computers into a network, and so there is a concept called a centralized directory repository comes into the role. So in this particular thing, what we had done is like we collected all the user identification and the authorization stuff into a single place, so that whenever I wanted to access one computer, I wanted to access one computer within the organization, I can just provide my credential or my authentication to the centralized server, and he will validate that I am an authorized user, authorized person to access this particular system. So, for example, you can take the example of the these PCs which are installed all over the ASU. So, although we don't need to set up our own credentials into each and every PC in the ASU. It is just simple that like basically you just log in anywhere in the any PC, it will just validate with the ASU's identity management, and then provide you access to this particular like any PC in the ASU. Then there comes the cloud era. Basically, everything is start migrating to the cloud. So then we got the concept called as federated identity or a single sign in sign on. And so basically, what this two functionalities like they basically provide you access to the resource which is not within your organization. For example, let's take an Google account as your identity manager. So just through your Google account, you can able to access different web applications. Like if you go to Canva, you can just click on sign in with Google and you get the access to that particular software. So that is something called as federated identity. And again, then there is some concept called as single sign-on. So single sign-on is again like just to use different resources on the ASU. For example, this one single portal of ASU that is called as My ASU, and there are multiple softwares which are involved in the which are used by the ASU professors or students, such as Zoom is one of the example. Like if you just log in with the your ASU ID, you will get the access of the Zoom of the ASU. That is a crucial example. There is one example of single sign-on. And now in current scenario, like there's more research going around this adaptive and the contextual identity. So basically, what is this adaptive and the contextual identity is it not just consider the role of the user or just the password of the user. It also consider the behavior of the user, like how many times he is logging into the system or where he is located. All these things are comes into adaptive and the contextual identity. So I wanted to share one example with you guys. So I have this account of Phoenix Library, Phoenix Public Library. It has some cool books that my brother wanted to read back in India. So I shared that my account credential with him so that he can access that books. But he was not able to access that books because he was located in India. So basically, that was an example of this adapting the contextual identity. So basically, what happening in that Phoenix Libraries portal is that he was checking if the user IP address is located within the US or not. If it is not in the US, he is not allowing the user to access that particular resource. So that is a very good example of adapting the contextual identity. And when there is so now this is a Christmas season, so now most of the time there are a lot of sale and Black Friday sales and all those things. So what most of the people do, they will create a bot accounts on Amazon, on Walmart, and then they will try to stock of all the products which are available on the sale, and then they will sell them separately. Now, these e-commerce identity managers are so enhanced, like they identify the behavior if it is a bot or it is a normal user. So all these things are example of the adaptive and the contextual identity that you are evolving with the time. So yeah. Now coming to the core functions of the identity access management. So as I mentioned, the core functions are the authentication, authorization, user management, and the central user repository. Central user repository is the kind of a database or a trusted data source which can validate that this particular user is accessible. This particular user can access the system or not. Then, as I mentioned about the user management, user management component of like it control all the users flow, like users life cycle. It create the user, it deactivate the user, and then whatever action we wanted to take on a particular user, it is managed by user management. Then the authentication and authorization that I will cover in the next slides. Yeah, so one crucial part here is so here I have mentioned the term identity and the access management. Previously it was identity management. So management is just specific to the managing the user, like just managing the identity of the user, like all the data on the user. But when it comes to identity and access management, identity management is extended with the some access controls, like how particular user can access resource, or what kind of resource is accessible to that user, or what kind of action he can perform within the software system. So all these are the extension of the identity management, and it is called as identity and the access management. So yeah, again, this is a like kind of a very high level diagram of the identity and the access management components. So we have the users of the system, then we have the access management services, and access management services are applied on the resources. And before that, user need to validate is valid user in the identity management. So in the identity management, as you can see, these are all the services which are the part of the identity management. So, for example, credential management. So, if you have seen, like a lot of time the Google asks us to change our password in the repeated time. So, this is a part. This is kind of a credential management thing. Then self-service. So, for example, I feel like I shared my account with someone and I wanted to change the password of my account. So in that case, I want some functionality through which I can directly go and change. Like it shouldn't restrict me. So this is then there is this service called a self-service portal within the identity management, where user can go and manage his identity. If he wanted to change his credential or password, something like that, so he can do that. All the stuff there. Similarly, other services within the identity management are listed here, like profile management. Registration is also one of the key components where you wanted to enroll a particular student. Then there is provisioning policy on role management. So these are the important services within the identity management, which basically tells the system basically tells the system what all the resources and those are the policies are accessible to the particular user of the system. Yeah. So then coming to the access management again, it is basically control all the authentication authorization things. Then it validated the access policy before granting access to the particular resource. And then again, federated learning, as I mentioned, if I'm an organization like Google, so there, I need to manage the credential and the tokens of this token. Sorry, I'm using the wrong terminology, not tokens. The identity and the credential of the users, which are beyond my organization, which are beyond my boundaries. For example, if I'm let's take an example of Canva as a tool. So if I'm logging with the Canva, if I'm a user of the Google and I'm wanted to use Canva as well. So if I'm logging with the Canva, so in that case, there will be some credential which is generated on the Google, which is Canva and the user. So in the federated identity, I need to manage those credentials as well. So that is also one of the crucial component in the access management. And then if you see this last box, this is the ID source. So basically, ID source is like what kind of identity management need to be identity manager need to manage. So there can be human resources like, for example, users. There might be your employees as well, or might be admin of the system. And then we have the different vendors and the contractors and the customer. So coming to the architecture part of IAM. This is the overall flow how basically user identity manage identity and sorry I will use the term IAM. So IAM work. So starting with this particular component, I have organization. So basically, what this organization will do, it will set up all the policies and all the rules within the identity and the access management system. So, like for example, in ASU, we need to change password after in every 1 year. So that is something that, we do at the organization level. So these kind of policies are set up by the organization itself. Then we have the main user of the system, and then there are all the components I have mentioned. So we will go one by one. So first of all, the user will provide his credential. Like credential, in the case, the credential can be different. Like it might be password or some token, just like OTP, or might be a biometric credential as well, or maybe some digital certificates. So basically, user will provide credential to the access authentication management services. What will this authentication management service will do? It will just validate this particular credential using the user management services. So if you see this authoritative source, it is basically a trusted data source where all the information of a particular user is stored. It might be some database, or if you are using CRM like software like Salesforce, so you can use that as well. Or it might be anything. It might be HR management system as well, but it should be trusted by the whole organization. So when user pass the credential to the authentication manager, it will just validate with the manager if that particular user is active in the system or not. And if the credential are valid, like for example, I'm giving him the user ID with some other name and using the password some other. So in that case, it shouldn't authenticate me. So it is very important to provide the credential. So all these things are managed by user management system. So this is the one loop. Then come the next part. When user want, so this is a data management provisioning. This is a crucial part. Consider it as a database of the complete system, and here all the data are stored in a distributed way for the user. For example, let's take an example. I'm in a microservice kind of architecture, and my data is stored in a different location, different databases. Like for example, I have one database for storing my orders. I have one database for storing my products, and I have one database just to store my profile. So in that case, in this distributed scenario, before providing access, like for example, products is something that cannot be that cannot be updated or write by the user, the normal customer. It should be by someone within the organization or within my team, like a particular admin should be able to do that. So for that, I will require access management. I need to manage the, like if I'm able to do that particular action or not. It should be am I have the access to do that action or not? It is managed by the access management thing. So whenever user will after the authentication is completed. So for example, so for example, here we have one database called as product, and this user, let's say, is just a customer. So, and this is the authenticated customer for the moment. So this customer now wanted to access this product. So what we will do, we will go through the access management. Here, access management will validate if this particular customer has access to product or not. So if this customer just wanted to read product, basically just wanted to view the product. So in that case, he will allow him to basically just to view this particular product. But in case if this customer is this customer trying to update the product, so if this customer trying to update the product, it should be able to do that. So it is this access management services. So what they will do, they will check what kind of data the user wants to access and if they have a proper authorization or not for performing that particular action. And how they will do is using this authorization management module. So in the authorization management model, there are two main components. One is authorization models. So what these authorization models are, it's kind of a different kind of policies, or you can say different kind of policies or rules, which is defined within the authorization model. And desired state. So desired state is something like, for example, as I mentioned previously, like in Canvas, we have different roles. We have student role, TA role, and for example, teacher role. So last year I was a student, and this year I am a TA. So in that case, and maybe next semester I will be again student. So there should be some there should be some access just only limited for the TA but not for the student. So desired state is something which keep the record of the user and their specific permissions. So basically, it is kind of a dictionary or a database which store all the permission allotted to a particular user. So this is the authorization management model, and then we have monitoring the audit module. It is just like every time you log into system or whatever action you are performing within the system, it is monitored and logged by this particular authorization, sorry, monitoring and the audit management module. It is really important from the compliance perspective because there are a lot of compliance that need to be followed. So this particular monitoring audit module come really came into the picture. So yeah, coming to like yeah, so let's discuss some of the component in very detail. So coming to this user management part. So as I mentioned, like yeah. So coming to this user management part, so starting with user provisioning. So let's take an example like there is user provisioning. So when you join, so in within the organization there are multiple software where we need to create, we need to provide them or we need to create the accounts for a particular user. So within the organization we use multiple systems like we have HR management system, then we have finance management systems, or maybe just um, normal different kind of tools like Google Workspace or maybe Microsoft Workspace. So when a user join into organization or any team, so it is a we need to provide him, we need to grant him access to all these resources. So for that, we will just create a account in the user management system or user management, and then it will replicate all this credential into the different systems available within the organization. And similarly, for example, if that user is leaving the organization, so it is very crucial to stop the access of that particular user. So that is also managed by the user management module. Then, as I mentioned previously, self-service portal. So this allows user to perform certain tasks by themselves, such as resetting a password or requesting access to a specific resource. All these things are managed by self-service portal. And then there is also one more thing. So here I use something called as password management, but the more appropriate term will be the credential management. So if I wanted to change my password or if I wanted to change my tokens, all these things are comes into the password management or the credential management thing. And also like user management is also responsible for the life cycle of the user. So as I mentioned, like this basically it changed the user account as an employee, then change the role or location within the organization. Like for example, today I'm working in the sales department and tomorrow I wanted to work in the tech department within the organization. So this all the things are managed, user life cycle is managed by the user management module. So effective user management ensure that the right people have the right access at the right time. So it is very important. And that access is promptly revoked when no longer required for the user. So as I mentioned, I was a student last year, so I don't have some access, but now I'm a TA, so they provide me some access, but next semester I might not be a TA, I might be just a student. So it is very crucial to all those access which are important for the TA but not for the student revoke from me. Yeah. So coming to authentication. So authentication is basically a process to verify to a user who are they claiming to be. So as I mentioned in the previously we used to validate the user based on some ID cards. But in the software system, we use different types of authentication resources. So one of them is this something like basically password. It is just something that particular user will know. Like it is not something that like or shared organization wide, or it is not something that is shared among the team or something like that. It is just a particular user will know the for example password. Then security token. So if I have a mobile device, so I get OTP on that. So it's stored at some places, right? So that is the security token. So OTPs or maybe client ID, client secret tokens. These are the security tokens. That is also one way to authenticate that particular user. And for example, in many scenarios, in many scenarios, like it might not be a real person. Your user might not be a real person. Let's say an example of a microservice based architecture again. So if I have one service name as product, let me draw it for you. So if I have one service, it is called as product service, and then we have one more service called as order service. In this case, I wanted to do some. The product service wanted to do some action within the order service. But this is also restricted by the authorization and the access module. So in that case, the product service will need to validate like it is like the request is coming from the product service. The request which is sent by the product service, it should be validated by the order service that it is by the product service itself. So in this case scenarios, we can't use the password because password is something that should be known to a real person itself. So that's where we come to. That's where the security tokens come into the play. So what we will do, we will just create some security tokens, and we will just basically we will just configure those security tokens within the product service, and whenever that service will send request to the order service, so it will send this credential to the order service, and through that credential the order service will come to know that yeah, the request is coming from the product service and I can process this request. And if some unauthorized access is there, so he or like that particular user or particular service won't have the credential for the product service, so those requests will be rejected by the other service. So this is the security tokens. And yes, so and the another factor is like biometrics or basically biometrics or fingerprint or facial recognition or retina scan. So just if you just wanted to access your mobile phone, so this day we use fingerprint on the fingerprint sensor or maybe facial recognition. So these are the example of biometrics based authentication. And so so these three methods are really good, but there might be security risks with the advancement in technology, like there are a lot of security risks. So just this after these three, we got something called as MFA, that is multi-factor authentication. So multi-factor authentication is something like it just don't rely on the one of the top three. It is the combination of these three things. Either you will require to present your password, and then you will get the OTP. That is one example of MFA. Or you will require to present a biometric, then he will ask you for the some PIN code or something like that. This is one example of the MFA. And as I mentioned, if it is a service to service communication, for example, again let's go to that same example of product service, and then we have the order service. And if you wanted to make some request to order service, and let's say we wanted to make this particular system MFA based authentication. So what I will do is like previously I was just sharing client ID and the client ID secret with the order ID. With that, what I can do is I can also add the certificates like basically CSI certificates, so that with my client ID client secret, this order service will validate if that the certificate is also valid or not, and if it is belong to the product service or not. So this we mostly use with the cloud-based systems, like if you wanted to access some EC2 servers or AWS EC2 servers. So in most of those cases, we use the certificates with authentication with client ID and client secret. So there is also one more example of MFA when it's come to just software to software interaction. Yeah. So going further, authentication part, authorization part. So if you see like in this particular diagram, so it will just validate your credential, like if you have the particular, if you have the access to enter the building or not. So authentication is something you are just entering the system. Then comes into the role authorization. In the authorization part, like a systems consist of very different multiple resources. So, for example, if you take this example, once I enter the building, I will have access to some particular rooms, but I don't have access for some particular floors, right? So, these all these factors are managed by the authorization. Now, authorization usually based on these three factors. So one is role-based authentic authorization, attribute-based authorization, or maybe policy-based access control. So as I mentioned, the role base it will just validate the role of the user. Like if we, there might be some different roles as I mentioned, like there might be some role as customer, maybe normal user, a team user, or admin user. So authorization will check like if the particular resource should be allowed to access by admins only, or maybe that resource can be accessed by a customer or not. All these things are managed by the role-based access control. And this is very common authorization model. So in this case, like we never assign different role, and each role will have permission associated with them. Now, next comes to the attribute-based access control. So this model uses attributes for the user resources and the environment to make access decision. So it will in this attribute-based access control, it not only validate the role of the user, there comes the different factors like what kind of resource they wanted to access and what kind of environment they are in. So these are all are kind of attribute-based access control. So one of the example, if I wanted to give related to attribute-based access control is the ASU of supercomputer is sold. So if you're someone who's connected on your home Wi-Fi, you can't directly access the phone. You need to connect with the VPN. So you need to be on the network of the ASU for that. So that is a attribute. That is network is one of the environment attribute to access the story computer. Then comes the policy-based access control. So it is just an extension of attribute-based access control, but it has more granularity, and it basically it provides more permission and the policies to access that particular resource. So policy-based access control, I can think of is basically GitHub repository. So in a GitHub repository, like you can basically define different policies. Like either you can maintain a repository, or you can write or commit or be admin of that repository. So based on the about the role, you can define this policy within the GitHub repository. That is policy-based access control. So this is kind of a workflow for the user around user access to resource. So, for example, if user wanted to access, so he need to go through all this script to access that particular resource. So, if this particular user he requested for particular some resource within the system. So, it will pass to the community manager. He will identify the user. He will validate if the user he will validate the user credential, and if they are not valid, it will be notified to the user that credentials are not valid. And in that case, user need to try same process again. But that is valid. So then the request will go to basically authorization model. So in the authorization model, they will check the different like the policy they have applied. Like is it a role based or is it attribute based or is it a policy based? So in authorization model, it will just check if that particular user is again can access that resource or not. Through this policy decision request, it will also access for that resource. And if the user is allowed to access that resource, and it will be done with the result. We will be done with the result. Otherwise, again, user will get notified that he is not authorized to access this particular resource. So this is the usual workflow for user access resource. So this is kind of a theoretical flow. But now this is, so this is something OSP protocol that is widely used in the industry. So basically, OSP protocol is basically used to authenticate and authorize the different users within web and web applications. So basically is an authorization framework that enables application to obtain immediate access to the user and so primarily use the HTTP credentials. So what will happen is that a user in the browser will try to access some resource. And, for example, we have some API gateway. Basically, API gateway is just a resource gateway. So this request will forward to the API gateway, and it will check like if the user is authenticated or not. If he is not authenticated, it will reply with the it will reply the login page of the IDP, that is identity provider, the identity management body, and then the user will enter his credential, and then these credentials are passed to the your identity provider. Your identity provider will validate the credential of the credentials, like if it is the correct password for the correct user or not for the correct security that is provided, and then we certificates for correct certificates provided or not. And this authorization code is used only once, like this is only one time code. But the authorization code is again computer value. Again, like you can access resource just based on the authorization code. Even because in the over protocol, you will require access token to access that resource. So what you will do, using this authorization code, again you will ask your identity provider to give me the proper access codes. So with this authorization code, I will again go to the API gateway, and API gateway will see the request for the authorization code, not the access tokens. So then again forward the request to identity provider, and again like in this case, API gateway will provide its primary and client secret. So basically, the provider is not just only validating the user, but it is also validating the service. If the request is coming from the proper service or not. In this case, the API gateway is the service, which is validated by the primary and client secret, and the user is validated by the authentication code. So once identity provider validates both the potential, he will return the access token and the request token, and also will provide the ID of the user to API gateway. On that basis, on that use of the user ID, API gateway will forward the request to appropriate resources. And then in this diagram, we mentioned that this access token and the refresh token and the ID is set up in the session cookies. But it might not be session cookies always, because here we are taking the example of the web application, so that's why it is set in the session cookies. But if we wanted to just access some APIs or something like that, so we can just put the credential into some header of the HTTP request. And then the session cookies will go to user, and then access token. Then basically using this access token, the user can access particular resources within the system. So yeah, like coming to the benefits, like why it is important to use IAMs, how they enhance your role, how they enhance your system. So basically they provide the enhanced security. So by centralizing and standardizing identity management and access control, I am significantly reduce a risk of unauthorized access and data breaches, and it also reduces the complexity on the on a particular application level to validate user again and again. So let's say this is my system. I have multiple. I have different systems. Different services in my system. Let's say service one, service two, service three. If I don't have any centralized IAM, so in that case, I need to build user management and all this like authentication authorization for individual or the individual system itself. Like for every system, I will require this particular module. But when I make this as a centralized, when I make them as centralized, so in that case, centralized. So in that case, whenever user wanted to access any resource, he will go to and then provide the access to the user. In that case, it also reduces the complexity of the application. In that case, I just need to focus on the I just need to focus on the application logic, not the always like IAM logic or something like that. Then yeah, improved user experience. So centralized IAM, like as I mentioned, to provide you the service of single sign-on. Basically, single sign-on allows users to access multiple applications within the single set of credential, reducing the password fatigue and the input productivity as well. So, for example, I created my Google account just so I just need to remember my Google account user ID and the password. Using that just Google account, I can use multiple applications which are separated by the Google account itself. Just like with the camera as an example, or maybe new application like Notions, or maybe just a different or some different applications like Instagram, Facebook, everything. So that is an advantage of single sign-on and using the control the IAM. And then like regulatory compliances. So there are different regulatory compliances like GDPR or CCPA, and all of them also like have some user management protocols. So sometimes I am make it easier to manage all these apply all these compliances on very easily on a centralized IAM. And then the operational efficiency. So automating user provisioning and deprovisioning like save a lot of time and reduce like as it is again the centralized it is again the centralized IAM. You need to go to every service and create a user in each and every services. I need to create a user in centralized IAM and it will validate the services. And cost reduction. So, like when we start implementing IAM, like building from scratch, initially it look like it will be like a very heavy investment. But like going further, when we wanted to scale our software, significantly reduce our cost and as well as it reduce ID support needs and like I mentioned, enhance the security of the system. Yeah, coming to the IDP. So what is IDP? So IDP is something which abstract all these component within itself. So we discuss in the IAM, we require three main components, like that is authorization module, authentication module, and as well as the module. So all these things are basically accepted by this identity provider. Identity providers. So you don't need to focus on like managing the user because those things are already built and you can just use all this already. You don't need to focus on actual components. For example, if you are building some AI product, you don't need to invest your time on building the user management module, like an authentication module, all this stuff. You just wanted to focus on your core engine, that is your AI module. So that's what IDP helps you with. So, it basically create, maintain, and manage identity of all the user, like all kind of user in manager role and everything. So like IDPs are play a crucial role in federated identity scenario, enabling single sign-on on multiple systems. So this means user can just log in into the one system, one IDP, that is one identity provider, and then they can access different software systems or services beyond the boundaries of the organizations as well. So here I'm using some popular identity providers. So Okta is very famous. Then Azure has its own Active Directory as IDP. Then Google Identity is one of them. In AWS also there's something called as AWS IAM that is also really good IAM. And like modern day IDPs, you don't need to configure like lot of stuff. Like they are highly configured, and you can configure everything like roles of the user, policies of the user, and how you want to authenticate them. All these things are in the IDP. Uh, also like I just wanted to mention about the this lightweight directory access protocol LDAP. So it was a traditional tool to manage the basically identity and the access of the user. So LDAP is very specific to an organization. It is basically it stores in the hierarchy, like it will create the user based on their roles in the department. It is very specific to a particular organization, and it is not that efficient. when it's come to the complex authentication scenarios or complex authentication authorization scenarios, like when you wanted to validate on the policy level, or you wanted to enable the multi-factor authentication. So in those scenarios, LDAP is not that efficient, so that's why we develop something called as identity providers. So modern IAM technologies. So we look to the future, seven modern IAM technologies are gaining. So one of them is cloud-based IAM solution, which offer the scalable and flexibility needed in today's dynamic business environment. And very easy to integrate and provide with all kind of cloud providers. Also, if you don't want it to go with the cloud-based solution, so they provide you the option to use the on-premise environment as well. Then nowadays, like as you see, as you mentioned, biometric authentication is also coming into the role. This includes like fingerprint scanning, facial recognition. Again, like removable biometrics, all these things are there. Then also, as I mentioned about the adaptive authentication, adaptive authentication is something like it will context of the situation, like a location or the behavior of the user, all these things, and on the basis it will provide authorization and the authentication of the user. Yeah, coming to this final part. So this is I'm going to present this architecture like where I have integrated. This is one of the use cases that I have worked on, and here, like, I have used this identity manager, identity and access management, and identity provider integrated this whole architecture. So it was like I was building one AI product. It involved like two or three different services, and I don't want to invest my time scratch. So what happens like I need to provide the system. So if you see, this is kind of a three-tier architecture. So here we have the database, then this is kind of a backend. So this is kind of a backend logic, and then I have this basically front-end code, front-end or the view basis. And so in this scenario, like we don't have the iOS application, but we have a web application, Android application. And I don't want it to create a separate system to manage the from the Android and monitor in the application. So that's why I went with the which is IDP. So how the system interact with each other. For example, wanted to access some resource within my application. So it will go request to the API gateway. So I have used Amazon API gateway in this scenario. Check if that particular user is authorized or not. And if it is authenticated, it will send the logic to the prediction, and then this credential will be validated by the OAuth. It will then just it will then just to the basically the client application, and this basically this credential will be passed to the gateway. Again will go to basically identity, and this identity will provide if this tokens are valid if the valid tokens are not. If they are the valid tokens, in that case they will it will respond with assumption. In that case, my API will forward my request to services. And by this architecture, why I go with this architecture is like I don't want to do I don't want to spend time so and again if you are available with the AWS Lambda, so it is a serverless function, and we can't put the very heavy complex logic in that particular Lambda functions. We just want quick response, and it should be very granular logic. So in that case, I'm not supposed to onboard like a very complex logic here as well. So if I choose to evaluate my credential on any lectures at the service level, it will like each service will go and validate request to OAuth. So it will kind of introduce a lot of complexity for the basically the service to service to. So that's why I separated out the user model and which is kind of just comparing the authentication authorization flow, and then it just forward the request to basically other services. So yeah, I think yeah we have more 15 minutes. So any one of you have any questions or any doubts? No, I'm open for the questions. Yeah. Yeah, so just like the relevant and self-update link. So if we have like 15 minutes, I think I can provide a quick demo of how can like modern ID to look like. So yeah, like this is a dashboard of the ID. So, so here you can see like there are different modules of the author. So as you can see here, there is an authentication module, then there is a user management module, and in the application module. So if I want to drop down, so in the application part, you can just configure all of your different services or all the APIs of the web services. Then in the authentication module, authentication module, in one of the architecture, I mean one of the authorization source. So you will need the option of configuring the sources. Like for example, if it's a database, some if it is a database or like if you can see like mention, you can use different kind of sources. Basically, if you want your own data sources like Redis or MongoDB or anything, you can just use those. And then you can configure a single sign-on base using this Argon documentation. So, you can also choose different kind of authentication approaches. Like if you don't want it to go with the password approach, you can use OTP-based approach or again the token-based approach. And then here you can this is your user management model where you can configure different users, and you can also create different roles within the system. So yeah, and roles, and also you can provide the policies within the role. For example, as you can see, like yeah. So these are the different policies that are linked with this particular role. And at this point of time, I don't think I have any use in this account, but yeah. So all these things are managed by the your IDP itself. And this then like in this IDP, you can also configure like how your login page should look like. Uh, it is the authentication, so you can edit the email templates and all these things. So this is a really good tool if you wanted to focus on your actual business logic rather than just focusing on the different components. This is kind of one of those usability factor. Uh, where like you can just use the already built systems. And like in the monitoring, so you can get all the logs of the system, like how basically users are interacting with the systems, what are the operations they are done, like all the things are there. And yeah, like again, like this is also one of the great functionality of this modern day ID tools. Like you can create flows based on like what are the actions you wanted to take before registering the user or after registration, or like you can set up your password reset challenges, like just different kind of reset challenges, not just the OTP. So yeah, you can. This is a really good tool that you can use, and I guess like all of them, like not just this. What if you are going with the any cloud-based IDP, just like AWS IAM or Google Cloud IAM, all of them have the same functionality. And also, rather than just coming to dashboard and manually creating the users or roles or like manually managing all this stuff, you can also use the APIs. So if you just call these APIs, oh, I think I leaked my credentials. Yeah, that's fine. So so you can just use these APIs. You can use these APIs, and then you can configure. You can just configure. You can just automate all this user management process or the automation process as well. Yeah, I think that's it. Anybody has any question? Yeah. Yes. Oh, yeah. Yes.
Well, thank you. You saw, some really kind of from concept to actual implementation with architecture described to you at a high level. And so the question that is sent directly to me is not showing up there is that it seems the template for individual project three has changed again, not since the last time. And if last time was changed by Professor Carter on Sunday or Saturday, one of those 2 days, I can't know for sure. But since then, it has not changed. So it could be that you didn't actually see the change. I think we also provided details on the update that the template had changed. So the question that is asked is the following. The requirement received and derived. So in the original or in the second version of the